Most problems are not complicated, just unexamined. Most people believe their problems are complex. They are not. They are repetitive. What keeps people stuck is not the size of their problems, but the fact that they keep applying the same internal logic to every situation and expecting a different outcome. Change rarely comes from new information. It comes from seeing an old truth clearly enough that it can no longer be ignored. The first lesson most people resist is this: your life does not need to be fixed, your assumptions do. People waste years trying to control outcomes while refusing to examine the mental framework producing those outcomes. When the framework changes, many problems dissolve without effort. Here is where clarity begins. One of the most reliable ways to reduce suffering is to recognize that not everything that feels urgent is important. Urgency is often emotional noise disguised as necessity. The mind treats discomfort as a crisis, even when nothing truly essential is at risk. Learning to pause before reacting immediately removes a surprising number of conflicts, regrets, and unnecessary stress. Another overlooked truth: clarity beats motivation every time. Motivation fluctuates, clarity does not. When you clearly understand why something matters, or why it does not, action becomes simpler. Most procrastination is not laziness. It is confusion pretending to be fatigue. People also underestimate how many problems come from misplaced responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, not for how others interpret them. The moment you stop trying to manage other people's emotional reactions, a heavy layer of anxiety disappears. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters that protect your energy from constant negotiation. A quiet but powerful lesson follows: most arguments are not about truth. They are about identity. When someone feels attacked, they stop listening. Understanding this turns many conflicts into non-events. You stop trying to win, and start deciding whether the conversation is even worth having. Another source of unnecessary struggle is the belief that feeling bad means something is wrong. It does not. Discomfort is not a malfunction, it is information. Avoiding it creates far more problems than facing it calmly. Emotional avoidance is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Few people realize how much suffering comes from resisting reality instead of responding to it. Acceptance is not surrender. It is the removal of friction between what is happening and what you wish were happening. Once friction is gone, energy becomes available for intelligent action. One of the most stabilizing insights is learning that you do not need certainty to move forward. You need direction. Waiting until fear disappears is how people remain stuck for years. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to act without negotiating with it. Another lesson most people learn too late: your environment quietly shapes your behavior more than your willpower ever will. If you want different results, design different surroundings. Expecting discipline to override a toxic environment is unrealistic and unnecessary. Many interpersonal problems come from a simple misunderstanding. Being understood is not the same as being validated. You can acknowledge someone's feelings without agreeing with their conclusions. When this distinction becomes clear, relationships become less exhausting. A hard but liberating truth is that no one is coming to rescue you from the consequences of your choices. This is not pessimistic, it is empowering. Responsibility returns control to where it belongs. Victimhood removes it. Another subtle but life-changing lesson is recognizing that most people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you imagine. Social anxiety fades quickly once this is understood. Freedom follows when you stop performing for an audience that does not exist. Finally, one of the most foundational lessons of all: your attention is your life. Whatever consistently holds your attention eventually shapes your identity. Protecting attention is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. These are not motivational ideas. They are structural ones. When even a few of these principles are applied honestly, a significant portion of daily problems simply stop appearing. Not because life becomes easy, but because the mind becomes clearer. In the next part, we will move deeper into relationships, expectations, and the invisible contracts people carry, and how breaking those contracts silently resolves conflicts that otherwise seem endless. Relationships fail where expectations go unquestioned. Most interpersonal problems are not caused by bad intentions. They are caused by unspoken expectations. People carry invisible contracts into relationships and then feel betrayed when those contracts are violated, even though they were never agreed upon. The moment you recognize this, a large portion of emotional conflict becomes optional. One of the most stabilizing lessons is this: no one owes you consistency with the version of them you invented in your head. People change, circumstances shift. Holding others to an outdated image is a quiet way of creating resentment. Another difficult truth follows naturally: you cannot build closeness with people who refuse self-awareness. You can share space, history, even affection, but without self-reflection, Intimacy remains shallow. Expecting depth where there is no inner curiosity leads only to disappointment. Many relationships collapse under the weight of misunderstood kindness. Being nice is not the same as being honest. Avoiding discomfort in the short term often creates far greater damage later. Clarity may sting, but ambiguity corrodes. A lesson few people want to hear is that being needed is not the same as being loved. Dependence can look like loyalty, but it often masks fear. Healthy relationships allow choice, not obligation. When someone stays only because they feel they must, resentment is already forming. Another source of recurring conflict is the belief that communication alone solves problems. It does not. Alignment solves problems. You can communicate endlessly with someone whose values fundamentally clash with yours and still reach nowhere. Compatibility is not about agreement, it is about direction. One of the most liberating insights is learning that you are allowed to disappoint people who benefit from your silence. Growth often feels like betrayal to those who are comfortable with your compliance. This does not mean you are cruel, it means you are changing. People also underestimate how often conflict is fueled by fatigue rather than malice. Tired minds interpret neutral events as threats. Learning to pause major conversations when emotionally depleted prevents many unnecessary ruptures. Another lesson that quietly reduces drama is this: not every emotion deserves immediate expression. Expression without understanding often escalates chaos. Reflection before reaction preserves both dignity and clarity. A painful but essential truth is that you cannot save people who are committed to their own patterns. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Support does not require self-sacrifice. Many relational problems dissolve when people understand that respect is not negotiated through intensity. Raising emotional volume rarely produces understanding. Calm firmness does. Another overlooked principle is recognizing that people listen differently when they feel safe, not when they feel cornered. Creating safety does not mean agreeing. It means removing unnecessary threat from your tone, posture, and timing. Finally, one of the hardest lessons in relationships is accepting that closure is something you give yourself. Waiting for others to explain, apologize, or understand often keeps wounds open longer than necessary. Closure does not require permission. When these insights are applied, relationships do not become effortless, but they become far less confusing. The endless cycles of misunderstanding begin to break, not through control, but through clarity. In the next part, we will turn inward and examine work, ambition, identity, and why so many people feel lost even when they appear successful, and how a small shift in perspective resolves that tension. Ambition creates problems when identity is attached to outcomes. Many people believe their problems come from not having enough success. In reality, their problems come from being fused with success. When identity is tied to outcomes, every setback becomes a threat to the self. Failure is no longer information, it is humiliation. Progress feels fragile because the ego is constantly on trial. This single misunderstanding generates an enormous amount of anxiety, burnout, and quiet dissatisfaction. One of the most important lessons in adult life is this: work is something you do, not something you are. The moment this boundary collapses, balance disappears, praise becomes addictive, criticism becomes unbearable, and rest begins to feel like guilt. Another overlooked truth is that ambition without direction creates motion, not meaning. Many people are busy, productive, and exhausted, yet internally lost. They chase momentum because stopping would force reflection. But speed is not clarity, it only delays it. A painful lesson follows: you cannot outrun a lack of purpose with achievement. External progress does not resolve internal confusion. In fact, it often amplifies it. The higher someone climbs without self-understanding, the more disoriented they become. People also misjudge the role of discipline. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do what you hate. It is about reducing friction between what you value and what you do daily. When discipline feels like constant violence against yourself, something is misaligned. Another source of professional suffering is comparison. Comparison turns other people's paths into distractions. The moment you measure your life against someone else's timeline, you lose contact with your own. This creates artificial urgency and unnecessary shame. A quieter but powerful lesson is learning that consistency matters more than intensity. Intense bursts of effort feel heroic, but they are rarely sustainable. Calm repetition, though unglamorous, solves more problems over time than dramatic overexertion. Many people confuse confidence with certainty. True confidence tolerates uncertainty. It does not require guarantees to move forward. Those who wait for perfect clarity before acting often remain immobile for years. Mistaking caution for wisdom. Another truth rarely discussed is that burnout is not always caused by workload. It is often caused by misdirected effort, working hard on goals that no longer reflect who you are. The body protests when the mind refuses to listen. A lesson that resolves much internal conflict is recognizing that progress is not linear. And regression is not failure. Growth includes pauses, detours, and recalibration. Treating every slowdown as a crisis creates unnecessary self-contempt. People also suffer because they expect passion to be constant. Passion fluctuates, commitment endures. Waiting to feel inspired before acting gives emotions too much authority. Action based on values is steadier than action based on mood. Another stabilizing insight is understanding that you do not need to monetize every skill or interest. Turning everything into productivity robs life of play and curiosity. Not everything valuable must be useful. Finally, one of the most grounding lessons of all, you are allowed to redefine success more than once. What mattered at 20 does not have to matter at 40. Updating your goals is not quitting, it is maturity. When these principles are understood, ambition becomes lighter, work becomes a tool instead of a verdict, and many problems that once felt existential shrink back to their proper size. In the next part, we will examine fear, control, uncertainty, and why trying to eliminate fear creates more problems than living with it intelligently. Fear creates more problems when you try to eliminate it. Most people believe fear is the enemy. It is not. Fear becomes destructive only when it is misunderstood and fought blindly. The attempt to eliminate fear entirely is what creates paralysis, avoidance, and chronic anxiety. Fear is not a signal to stop, it is a signal to pay attention. One of the most liberating lessons is realizing that confidence is not the absence of fear, but the absence of confusion about what matters. When values are clear, fear loses its power to negotiate endlessly. You still feel it, but it no longer dictates your decisions. Many problems arise from the illusion of control. Trying to control everything increases anxiety because it exposes how little control you actually have. Control feels safe in theory, but exhausting in practice. Letting go of unnecessary control restores mental energy. Another hard truth is that certainty is emotionally comforting but intellectually dishonest. Life is uncertain by nature. Pretending otherwise creates rigid thinking and fragile plans. People who demand certainty before acting often suffer more than those who learn to move within ambiguity. A quiet but important lesson follows. Avoidance feeds fear. Every time you avoid a situation because it makes you uncomfortable, you teach your nervous system that discomfort equals danger. Over time, the range of safe situations shrinks. Courage is not dramatic action, it is gradual exposure. Many people misinterpret intuition as fear. Fear is loud, repetitive, and urgent. Intuition is quiet, brief, and clear. Learning to tell the difference prevents countless wrong decisions made in the name of gut feeling. Another source of anxiety is the belief that you must feel ready before acting. Readiness is a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite. Waiting to feel ready is often just fear wearing a polite mask. A stabilizing lesson is understanding that mistakes are not evidence of incompetence, but of engagement. People who do nothing make very few mistakes, and also very little progress. Perfectionism is fear disguised as standards. Many problems dissolve when people accept that uncertainty is not a phase to get through, but a condition to live with. Resisting this reality creates constant tension. Accepting it creates flexibility. Another overlooked truth is that safety is internal before it is external. You can remove external threats and still feel unsafe if your internal dialogue remains hostile. Learning to relate to yourself without constant judgment reduces fear more effectively than controlling circumstances. People also underestimate how much fear is social. Fear of judgment, rejection, and failure are amplified by imagination. Most people are too absorbed in their own concerns to scrutinize you the way you fear they will. Finally, one of the most powerful lessons regarding fear is this: you do not need to trust outcomes to trust yourself. Trusting yourself means knowing you can respond intelligently, even when things go wrong. This shifts fear from a barrier into a companion. When fear is understood rather than resisted, it loses its authority. It becomes information instead of obstruction, and many problems that once felt overwhelming become manageable. In the final part, we will bring everything together, examining meaning, responsibility, time, and what ultimately simplifies life more than any technique or strategy ever could. Life becomes simpler when responsibility replaces blame. At a certain point, wisdom stops adding and starts removing. Most people spend their lives collecting strategies, advice, and techniques, believing that more information will finally solve their problems. It rarely does. What changes life most is not accumulation, but subtraction, removing false beliefs, unnecessary obligations, and inherited assumptions that no longer serve reality. One of the final lessons many people learn late is this: blame feels relieving, but it costs control. The moment responsibility is outsourced, so is power. Responsibility is not about guilt, It is about authorship, when you accept that you are shaping more of your life than you want to admit. Clarity follows. Another essential truth is understanding that time reveals priorities more honestly than intentions ever will. You do not need to ask what matters to you. Look at how you spend your time, attention, and energy. They already tell the truth. Changing priorities begins with changing allocation, not promises. Many problems persist because people confuse busyness with progress. Movement is not direction. Doing more does not automatically mean doing what matters. Slowing down often exposes misalignment that speed was hiding. A difficult but grounding lesson is accepting that no one is thinking about your life as much as you are. This realization removes unnecessary performance and social pressure. Freedom grows when you stop living as if constantly observed. Another truth that simplifies life dramatically is recognizing that meaning is not discovered. It is constructed. Waiting for life to feel meaningful before acting keeps people passive. Meaning emerges through engagement, responsibility, and contribution, not through contemplation alone. People also underestimate the relief that comes from letting go of the need to be right. Being right is expensive. It costs flexibility, learning, and often connection. Choosing understanding over victory resolves countless conflicts silently. A subtle but powerful lesson is that clarity often feels boring compared to chaos. Chaos provides stimulation and distraction. Clarity removes drama. Many people unconsciously resist clarity because it demands responsibility rather than reaction. Another stabilizing insight is learning that self-respect is built through alignment, not self-criticism. Treating yourself harshly does not create discipline, it creates fear. Acting in line with your values builds trust with yourself over time. Many people wait for motivation to change. Change rarely begins with motivation. It begins with a decision to stop negotiating with the same excuses. Action precedes belief more often than belief precedes action. One of the most sobering lessons is recognizing that you will not feel ready before major life changes. Readiness is often only visible in hindsight. Waiting for certainty delays growth unnecessarily. Another truth that simplifies life is understanding that not every problem needs to be solved, some need to be outgrown. As perspective expands, certain issues lose relevance on their own. Growth quietly resolves what force cannot. People also suffer because they underestimate the cost of unresolved inner conflict. Inner clarity reduces outer complexity. When your internal world is organized, decisions become easier, boundaries firmer, and relationships clearer. A final lesson worth carrying forward is this: peace is not the absence of challenge, but the absence of inner resistance to reality. Life does not become gentle, you become steadier. At the deepest level, most problems persist because people avoid one simple question. What am I responsible for here? Even if it's uncomfortable. When that question is answered honestly, confusion fades. These 60 lessons do not remove difficulty from life. They remove unnecessary difficulty, the kind created by avoidance, confusion, and misplaced effort. Life remains demanding, but it becomes clearer. And clarity solves more problems than force ever will.